I've been driving the same route home from my night shift at the factory for 3 years now. It's a lonely stretch of highway that cuts through farmland, with maybe 1 or 2 cars passing in the opposite direction on a busy night. Most of the time, it's just me and the darkness. That's why I was so surprised when I saw someone standing on the side of the road around 2:30 a.m. It was a woman in a white dress, just standing there with her thumb out like any normal hitchhiker. But something about the whole scene felt wrong. For one thing, there was no broken down car anywhere nearby. For another, she was standing in the middle of nowhere. The nearest town was at least 20 miles in either direction. I slowed down as I approached, trying to get a better look. She appeared to be young, maybe in her 20s, with long dark hair that seemed to move even though there wasn't any wind. Her dress looked old-fashioned, like something from the 1950s. As I got closer, she turned to look at me, and I got my first clear view of her face. She was beautiful, but there was something unsettling about her expression, completely blank, like she was sleepwalking. Against my better judgment, I pulled over. I don't usually pick up hitchhikers, especially not at this hour, but something about her seemed so helpless. Maybe it was the way she just stood there, not waving frantically or looking desperate like most people would if they were stranded. I rolled down the passenger window and called out, "You need a ride?" She nodded slowly and walked toward the car. Up close, I noticed her skin was incredibly pale, almost translucent. When she opened the door and slid into the passenger seat, the temperature in the car seemed to drop about 10 degrees. "Where are you headed?" I asked. "Millbrook Cemetery," she said, in a voice that was barely above a whisper. That struck me as odd. Millbrook Cemetery was about 15 miles down the road, but it would be closed at this hour. I figured maybe she lived nearby and was using it as a landmark. "I can get you close to there," I said, pulling back onto the highway. She didn't respond, just stared straight ahead through the windshield. I tried to make conversation a few times, asking if she was okay, if her car had broken down, but she never answered. She just sat there in complete silence, so still she barely seemed to be breathing. The temperature in the car kept dropping. I had to turn on the heater, but it didn't seem to help much. I glanced over at her a few times and noticed she wasn't wearing a seatbelt, but when I mentioned it, she acted like she didn't hear me. About 10 minutes into the drive, I started smelling something strange, like flowers, but old flowers, the kind you'd find at a funeral that had been sitting too long. The smell got stronger as we drove until it was almost overwhelming. When we finally reached the cemetery, she spoke for the second time. "You can let me out here," she said, pointing to the main gate. I pulled over, and she got out without saying thank you or goodbye. She just walked toward the cemetery fence and disappeared into the shadows between the trees. I waited a few seconds to make sure she was okay, then continued home. The next morning, I couldn't stop thinking about the encounter. Something about it had felt so surreal, like a dream. I decided to drive by the cemetery on my way to work that evening, just out of curiosity. That's when I saw the memorial. Right next to the main gate was a small plaque with a photo of a young woman. The same woman I'd picked up the night before. According to the plaque, Sarah Elizabeth Morrison had died in a car accident on that exact stretch of highway in 1957. She'd been walking home from a dance when she was struck by a drunk driver. The photo showed her wearing the same white dress I'd seen her in that night. I asked around town, and an old-timer at the diner told me the whole story. Sarah had been trying to get home to her family when she was killed. For decades afterward, people reported seeing a young woman in a white dress hitchhiking along that same stretch of road, always asking to be taken to Millbrook Cemetery. "She's still trying to get home," the old man said. "Been at it for over 60 years now." I've driven that route hundreds of times since then, and I've never seen her again. But sometimes, on really quiet nights, I'll catch a whiff of those old funeral flowers, and I'll remember how cold it got in my car that night. Part of me wonders if I actually helped her somehow, if giving her that ride finally let her rest. But another part of me thinks she's still out there, still trying to make that final journey home, still appearing to lonely drivers on dark highways who are kind enough to stop.
Don't forget to like and subscribe if you dare to hear more chilling stories.
There's nothing like a night drive in my dad's BMW M3, especially in summer with the windows down and empty highway stretching ahead. No traffic, no cops, just me and the open road, taking full advantage of German engineering. That particular night, I was pure joyriding, stereo off so I could focus on the beautiful sounds of the engine and the rush of air. At some point, I got this irresistible urge to pull off the highway and hit some back roads where I could really test the car's handling. The roads I found were perfect, narrow and winding through what looked like farmland, with tight bends that let me feel the tires grip and release through each turn. The streets were completely deserted, just me and the car cutting through the darkness. That's when I saw a flicker of light ahead and slammed on the brakes, barely avoiding a collision. When I came to a stop, my headlights illuminated a shopping cart sitting dead center in the middle of the road, like someone had wheeled it out there and abandoned it. Against my better judgment, I put the car in park and stepped out to investigate. The whole thing felt so random and out of place. Who leaves a shopping cart in the middle of a back road at midnight? The night air was warm but buggy, and the only sound was my engine ticking as it cooled. I walked up to the cart expecting to find something inside, but it was completely empty. Just an ordinary metal shopping cart blocking the road for no apparent reason. As I turned to head back to my car, two dark figures suddenly burst from the farmland beside the road, sprinting full speed straight toward me. My brain took a split second to process what I was seeing, but then survival instinct kicked in. I bolted back to my car and hit the start button just as those figures reached me. One stopped a few feet away, but the other sprinted directly into my passenger side door with a deafening thump. He didn't even flinch from the impact. It was like he couldn't see the car at all, running at full speed with no attempt to brace himself. We locked eyes through the window, and all my confidence evaporated. He stared at me with bloodshot, beady eyes. His clothes were torn like he'd been running through barbed wire. His hair was matted and wet, and his face was smeared with something dark, dirt, blood, or both. There was this unsettling, vacant expression that wasn't quite a scowl, but wasn't a smile either. Blood was spurting from somewhere on his body, but he didn't seem to notice or care. When he realized I wasn't getting out, he started fumbling with the door handle, trying to pry it open with increasing desperation. That snapped me back to reality. I maneuvered around the shopping cart and floored it out of there, my heart pounding as I sped away. The whole drive home I was conflicted. Part of me was still terrified, but another part wondered if that person had needed medical help. I called the police while driving and reported the incident, but I never heard back. When I got home and inspected the car, I was shocked by what I found. Blood was spattered across the entire passenger side, streaked on the mirror, smeared on the handle, dotting the rear panel. There was also a slight dent near the center of the door. But it was the amount of blood that really got to me. It was far more than I would have expected from that brief impact. An inhuman amount. My dad lost it when he saw the car the next morning, yelling about responsibility and repair costs before I could even explain what happened. Eventually, he came around when he understood what had happened, but that was one of the last times he let me go joyriding after dark. Looking back, I'm pretty sure it was a trap. Those people, probably homeless or desperate, had used the shopping cart to force drivers to stop, then tried to rob or carjack them.
I just happened to be fast enough to get away. But I still can't shake the image of that man's vacant eyes or the inhuman amount of blood on my car. Part of me wonders if my impact that night might have ended someone's life, and I'll never know for sure.
Don't forget to like and subscribe if you dare to hear more chilling stories.
I was driving back from visiting my grandmother in the next state over when it started. It was around midnight, and I was somewhere in the middle of nowhere, one of those stretches where you can drive for an hour without seeing anything but empty fields and the occasional farmhouse. I'd been flipping through radio stations, trying to find something to keep me awake, when I landed on a frequency that was playing old music from the 1940s, big band stuff, the kind my grandfather used to listen to. It wasn't my usual taste, but the signal was crystal clear, which was unusual for that area. The music was nice background noise for a while, but then it started getting weird. The songs would fade out in the middle, replaced by what sounded like conversations. Not like a talk show or DJ banter, more like I was picking up fragments of private phone calls or CB radio chatter. At first, I thought it was just interference from truckers or maybe some kind of radio malfunction. But as I kept listening, the voices became clearer, and what they were saying started to freak me out. "He's driving a blue sedan," a man's voice said. "Should be coming up on mile marker 247 any minute now." I glanced at my dashboard. I was driving a blue sedan, and when I looked ahead, I could see mile marker 247 approaching in my headlights. My blood went cold. I immediately reached to change the station, but before I could touch the dial, another voice came through. "We see him," a woman said. "He's right on schedule." I fumbled with the radio trying to find a different frequency, but every station I turned to had the same voices. They were talking about me, describing my car, my location, even the fact that I was alone. "He's getting nervous," the first man said, and I could swear I heard him chuckling. "He's trying to change the station." That's when I really started to panic. I turned the radio off completely, but the voices didn't stop. They were still coming through the speakers, as clear as if the radio was on full volume.
"Radio's off now," the woman observed. "But he can still hear us, can't you?" I was gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. I pressed the gas pedal down harder, trying to get through this area as fast as possible. But as my speed increased, the voices seemed to get more excited. "He's speeding up," a new voice said. This one sounded like an older man. "Must be in a real hurry to get somewhere." "Or maybe he's trying to get away from something," another voice added, and several people laughed. I tried rolling down the windows, thinking maybe fresh air would clear my head, help me think rationally about what was happening, but the voices followed me even outside the car. "Windows are down now," someone reported. "Nice night for a drive, isn't it?" That's when I realized they weren't just listening to me, they were watching me somehow. I looked around desperately, checking my mirrors, scanning the darkness on either side of the road, but there was nothing out there except empty fields. "He's looking for us," the woman said, sounding amused. "But he's not going to find us. We're much closer than he thinks." I floored the accelerator, pushing my car way past the speed limit. The engine was straining, but I didn't care. I just needed to get away from whatever this was. But the faster I drove, the louder the voices got, until they were practically shouting through my speakers. "Slow down," the first man commanded. "You're going to hurt yourself driving like that." "We're just trying to help," the woman added in a sickeningly sweet voice. "We're your friends. We've been waiting so long to talk to someone." "So very long," the older man agreed. "It gets lonely out here." I kept my foot on the gas until I saw lights ahead, a truck stop with a couple of semis parked in the lot. I'd never been so happy to see other people in my life. I pulled into the parking lot and turned off the engine, sitting there shaking as the silence finally returned. The voices were gone. The radio was just a normal radio again.
When I tried to find that frequency again, all I got was static. I went inside the truck stop and bought a coffee just to be around normal people for a while. The clerk was a fairly older woman who asked if I was okay because I looked pale. Just tired, I told her. Long drive. But as I was walking back to my car, I heard something that made my blood freeze. Coming from the CB radio in one of the trucks, I heard a familiar voice. "He's stopped at the truck stop, but don't worry, he'll be back on the road soon, and we'll be waiting." I drove the rest of the way home with my radio pulled completely out of the dashboard, the wires hanging loose. But even now, months later, I sometimes catch fragments of those voices late at night when I'm between stations. They're still out there, still watching, still waiting for their next lonely driver to pick up their frequency. I have no idea who they were or what they wanted, but I know they're real, and they're still broadcasting somewhere out there in the darkness, looking for their next conversation partner.
Don't forget to like and subscribe if you dare to hear more chilling stories.
As a long-haul truck driver, I'm used to endless stretches of nothing, especially on those desert highways that barely see any traffic after dark. This particular night, I was cutting through one of those two-lane roads that slice through open desert under a sky full of stars, trying to knock out my second-to-last delivery so I could get home. That's when I noticed the dark SUV in my mirrors. It wasn't riding my bumper or being aggressive. It was keeping a wide distance, but it was definitely following me. No matter how I adjusted my speed, it matched me perfectly. For nearly 40 miles, it just hovered there, always visible, always maintaining that same strange gap. At first, I thought maybe it was a nervous driver afraid to pass, but we went through several passing zones and the SUV never even tried. It just sat back there like it was waiting for something. Around 2 a.m., I decided to pull off at a small roadside rest area, just a dirt lot with faded parking spaces and a little shed with vending machines. There was only one dim bulb flickering above the machines, casting everything else in deep shadow. I figured I'd stretch my legs and let whoever was behind me pass, but when I looked back before shutting off the engine, I saw the SUV pull in too, parking way off in the far corner of the lot. That's when my confusion turned to pure rage. I stepped down from the cab aggressively and started marching over to confront whoever was playing games with me. But before I could get close, the SUV's engine roared to life and they peeled out, kicking up a huge cloud of dust and gravel. As they sped past me, I tried to see the driver, but the windows were too dark. Within seconds, the car was back on the highway and gone, leaving only the fading glow of red taillights. Part of me was relieved, but another part was deeply unsettled. I'd basically confirmed that whoever was in that car had been following me for some unknown reason, and they clearly didn't want me getting close. Exhausted from the encounter, I decided to take a quick nap before finishing my route. I did a walk around to make sure everything was secure, then climbed back into the cab and settled in for some rest. Maybe an hour later, I was woken by the faintest sound, light footsteps crunching on gravel. I cracked one of my window blinds and saw two figures crouched near the rear wheels of my trailer, inspecting the latch mechanisms like they were trying to figure out how to open them quietly. One of them had a small flashlight and was signaling to the other. I watched as one guy reached into a bag and pulled out what looked like bolt cutters. Without thinking, I slammed my palm down on the horn, sending the truck's air horn blaring. Both men jumped like they'd been electrocuted and scrambled back toward the roadside brush. Seconds later, headlights appeared out of nowhere, that same SUV from earlier, roaring back into view before disappearing into the night again. When the police arrived, they found fresh pry marks along one of the lower lock arms on my trailer, right where those guys had been working. The officers said they'd seen this before, cargo thieves who follow trucks for miles, waiting for the right opportunity to strike. The thought that I'd been marked as a target from the moment that SUV started following me still gives me chills. If I hadn't woken up, or if I'd been a deeper sleeper, they might have gotten away with my entire load.
Don't forget to like and subscribe if you dare to hear more chilling stories.
Working late at a dive bar means taking the long way home through winding back roads that cut through nothing but woods and farmland. Most nights, I actually enjoy the quiet drive. It's like a built-in detox after dealing with drunk customers all evening. But that night was different. The fog was thicker than I'd ever seen it. So dense, I had to slow to almost a crawl. My headlights barely penetrated a few feet ahead, and when I tried the high beams, they just made everything worse, turning the fog into a glowing white wall. That's when I noticed it. A faint yellow blinking light off to the right side of the road. At first, I thought it was just a roadside marker, but something was wrong. No matter how fast or slow I drove, the light stayed in the exact same position, blinking at a steady rhythm like it was keeping pace with my car. The weird feeling in my stomach grew stronger as I realized this thing was somehow matching my speed perfectly. When I slowed to a crawl, it slowed with me. When I came to a complete stop, it stopped too, just hovering there, in the fog, blinking in the same spot. That's when it started getting brighter. Not blinking faster, burning stronger with each pulse, like whatever it was had suddenly become more active. The light grew more intense with every flash, as if it was feeding off something. I reached down to shift into reverse, planning to turn around and get the hell out of there. But when I turned the key, nothing happened. The engine was completely dead. I knew for a fact I hadn't touched the ignition, but somehow my car had shut off completely. My hands started shaking as I tried the ignition again and again. Nothing. Meanwhile, that blinking yellow light kept getting brighter and brighter, almost pulsing with malevolent energy. I grabbed my phone to call for help, but the screen was black, dead. I'd checked the battery at the bar. It had been at 20%. Now it was completely lifeless, just like my car. Before I could process what was happening, the light suddenly exploded into blinding brightness, like a star going supernova. I threw my arms over my eyes and kept them shut for what felt like forever, feeling the heat and intensity of this massive light source burning through my eyelids. Then, just like that, it was gone. The fog was still thick, but there was nothing out there anymore. My heart was pounding as I reached for the ignition one more time, and this time, the engine turned over like nothing had happened. I drove home with my eyes glued to the road, terrified that looking away for even a second would bring that awful light back. But nothing else happened that night, and nothing has happened since. I've told this story to everyone I know, but no one has an explanation that makes sense. Whatever that thing was, it had complete control over my car and phone, and I have the terrible feeling it was deciding whether or not to let me leave.
If these stories sent chills down your spine, don't vanish into the darkness without hitting that like button. Share your scariest experience in the comments below, because your story might be featured next. And remember, the scariest thing is missing out, so subscribe now before the next nightmare finds you.